Hi, everybody. Fall is here. Looks nice and cool outside. Got a little bit of marine layer. Okay, so we'll start in a couple minutes. How are you doing?
Hey, Professor. Sorry, I was muted.
No problem. I was looking into some stuff earlier. Let me see if I can find it again. If I find it, I'll share it with you guys. But do you guys read news on security?
I subscribed to Wire, but I still haven't gotten my magazines. So I was thinking I'm gonna get I bought the Wire subscription. See if start reading.
I will, let me see if I can find something to share with you right now. I subscribe to a few things on LinkedIn and they send me some stuff. I came across some stuff on ransomware earlier today. It was kind of interesting. But there are a lot of really cool things that's released by different companies that they do research stuff. So I know this company, they do a lot of stuff with malware. Let me see if I can find some information. Let me get the resource center open. And then I'll drop it in chat right now and then we'll start. And of course, you know, there's NIST stuff, but they have some interesting blogs and resources, mainly for IT security management. So if you wanted to look, I think they posted a bunch of stuff on DDoS, dark web stuff, CISO stuff. Yeah, so I subscribe to a few things. But I was reading something on the new ransomware this morning. It was really interesting. All right. So I want to go over the lab today. So we only have a few things that we need to do. As you looked at the lab already, as some of you probably have. If you haven't, go ahead and download the document. So like our lecture, we are going to go over exceptions. And I want to focus a little bit more on input validation because I found that it's going to be useful for both sides, and then also to raise exception in the case where if you're reading logs or something, and you know, when you're writing the script for that, if it's generating some kind of error, or when you come across something, it can raise an exception for you to notify you. So and then we'll touch back on finally. I wrote the code with finally, and I tested it a few times earlier this morning. If you were up at about 3 or 4 a.m., that's my best work time. Because like as of right now, as soon as I sit down on Zoom, my dogs want to get out and go outside. So sorry about that. But so we're gonna look at exceptions, and then we're gonna do a couple of things with class and object. So that's what we're gonna address today. Okay. Let me open up the document and then I'll go into screen share so we can talk about the programs that we have to write. Okay, so in the lecture, we touch on exception, and we are mainly going to use the built-in exception. So when you look at the exercise 1, we want to refer to our notes and our chapter, but the exercise 1 asks you to mainly prompt the user to input his or her or their age. And then we want to use the built-in exception to control the input. So we know that age is going to be integer. That's something that we have to think about. And we want to scope the age to be between 1 to 120. Of course, when they're little, they can't enter, right? But what if you create a form for preschool or, daycare or something like that, where the parents can input their children age. And I only went up to 120. There are people that live above 120, of course. So we kind of have to scope it to a range so we can test it. So what we want to do is to build the program to have the built-in exception to control what they're inputting. And if they're inputting the wrong information, we want them to re-enter the information. So some of the things I want to note here when you write this program, number one, if you take the problem and you piece it out, you know that the user age needs to be integer. Okay. And we want to have some kind of input, right? And we know that we need to prompt the user inside the input. Then we want to use the exception. So something like we have to use try and maybe exception, okay? Or we have to state some form of condition. So we have to implement some condition to control for age between 1 to 120. And we want to keep prompting the user to re-enter the information if it's not valid. So if invalid, reprompt, right? So what's happening here is we have to think of a way to re-loop this. So we have to implement some kind of loop, okay? And in Python, it has the while and it has the for. The for will not be useful in this case, so we want to think about using while. Okay, so those are the things that we know given the exercise as required here. So now what we can start doing is we can start putting in the pieces and then be able to work with that. So do you have any question for me before we start looking at this program? Okay. So now let me get my file open. Oh, no, I don't want that in that form. Let me open it in Tony because I had previously used, let's close this one. So let's look at the first exercise. So this is how I approach it, and I want to explain it to you so you can have a better picture on how to start writing your program. We want a global variable for the age because in my case, I'm using function and inside it, I have built-in exception. So if you bury it in here, what will happen is it's, as you've seen in our lecture, that it's gonna not be able to see it. So we don't want that to be local. We want it to be global. Okay. And what I'm doing is I'm defining a function so that way inside it I can incorporate, sorry about my dog. So I can incorporate the user prompt and also the while loop. And here what I'm doing is I'm saying while that's true, okay, I'm gonna try to check for that range of age. Okay. And you can use greater or equal, but in this case, I'm doing range between 1 and 100 or above 1 and, so you can change this to the range that's required. So I didn't do exactly like what is stated there, but now, so in here, what we have is we have the exception. We have try, and we can say if age is less than 1 or age is greater than 100, we would print out invalid input. Okay? Because our range is between 1 to 120. Okay,
I got
so we can even change. Yes, Chris.
so maybe you should try before I say anything. But how would it if it does if you do put 121 for example? How it's gonna ask you again to input the age because where does
Yes.
that? Okay.
I'll save this and I will run it for you so you can see. So we're gonna test it with the valid age first. Okay, like 30. And it prints your age is 30. Now let me run it again. And let's say I wanted to hit 130. So you see, I have a never ending loop. So we have to get out of the loop. Okay. Okay, now, so I just have to stop it. So the issue that we see here is that it's always going to be true. So we have to find a way. So what do you think I should do at this point? See if you guys can solve this. I have a while loop that also always going to be true if it's above this condition or if it's below 1. Can I control it with another condition and get it out? Sure, right? Okay. But I want to show you that if we reprompt, we have to use some form of while, and you can implement something there. But for the try, we can say if age is less than 1 or age is greater than 120, print invalid input.
Can you
Else, yes.
Can you
Question?
use break? Can you use break?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I wanted you to find. Yes. Very good. I could said we can use something to get it out of the loop. Okay, very good. Then with the try, we state the criteria for the invalid. Okay, so it's gonna try that, right? It's gonna do that to check if it's not in that scope, right? That in that condition, if it doesn't meet the condition, it's gonna go to the else here, return age. Then with the accept, we want to know, so instead of using print out the error like what we've seen in a lecture, what you can do is you can use the shell to really see what kind of error it is. Okay. And in this case, that will be a value error. because if they put in anything outside of that, right? So let's run this program again so you can see. Let's say that I put a Q, right? What will happen is it shows me that this is a value error and it's an invalid literal to the integer because it's not an integer. So therefore I know, and Python would, with the built-in exception, it would detect the error that's specified in their library, right? So the value error is anything that cannot be interpreted as integer. So yes.
So in order for, oh, sorry, go ahead, Eiko.
Yeah, I didn't see the print. You said print that invalid input.
Yeah,
Well,
so what
that-
will happen is when I parse this as integer, right, it's going to try to parse the Q as an integer, and it caught that. It says that no, it cannot do that, right?
Oh,
So
you stop there. Stop. You
right,
don't go to
it's
print.
right.
Okay.
So this is a logic error in the case where if I leave it like this, what will happen is going to catch it. It's going to say, oh, I don't understand what that letter means. Like I cannot parse it as an integer. So it's still going to detect it as a value error because that's the type of error that we would expect the user to have. Okay.
Okay. Can you give us a case to make your process to print in void input? Make the program working
Yeah. So
on print in void.
okay, so we saw that it works with just the range that is stated here, right? So let's say I put in 0, right? And I can't get out of the loop at this point because now what happened is it tried to get to the accept here, and it's gonna be it won't be able to print any. Well, it keeps printing invalid input, try again, try again, try again, because it keeps being false. So you mentioned that I should break it, right? I should break it after that point and to be able to get it stop and then move on to the next part. So a way that we can get a, yes, Chris.
I think I figured out how to fix it,
Okay.
but I'm not sure if it's gonna work.
Okay. Share.
So on the if, do you just add another line with input, the first line, just recopy it and put it under after print that
Like this?
yeah.
Okay. So let's say I put 123.
No.
Yeah, it's out of
Just-
bound. Okay.
Oh, so okay. So then you put on number 2. Could you add a line between 2 and 3
Okay.
and put global age? Should work now, right?
Good job, Chris. So you see what Chris is doing? So we have this, right? And for Python, what we can do is we can integrate this by taking the variable and tell the interpreter, the compiler, that this is part of global, right? We have to bring it inside the function. From there, what he's doing here is when we after we did that, we can incorporate that. So we're bringing it from global and we're bringing it into the local side, so that way it can reference where that information would be stored. So now, yes.
I just realized it's then the whole except is just moot because
Yes.
it's never gonna
It's
run.
not gonna ever get
Never
there.
run. Yeah, it's never gonna get to 10 and
It's
11.
never gonna get there. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So when you do try and accept, you have to think about what you should be incorporating to make sure that, you know, if it catches it earlier, you know, like, so I put this here so you can see the difference between invalid input, right? So when this check false, it's only going to print this. Okay, because this, so when you nest an if condition in the try and accept, if that check false, it's just going to kick it over to here. That's it. It won't be able to get it to this part after we fix it like this.
So in other words, this method is only for developers then.
Yes,
It's not gonna be, you're not, when you put out a real life application, you're not gonna have any of this code because
right.
it's already,
It's
oh,
for
okay.
you. So because
Oh,
you anticipated that if it raises an error, it should tell you so that way your program doesn't stop. So what we can do is we can call on something else in place of that, so that way it's cohesive across. This is in the back, it's not in the front. Okay. So what this one is illustrating is that yes, we will get it to work, but the whole point in exception is for you to see that possibly these are the type of the errors, and we want to be able to catch it and move above it. Okay, because in the case where you know, buy code from somewhere else, companies do that, or you fix somebody's code, you can't rewrite 7,000 lines. You're just gonna have to work above it, right? You have to go about fixing it. Okay, so this, based on what you suggested, yes, it works, but it will never get to the accept part. Good job though. Yes.
Put the number like 100 is
Okay.
go to accept.
So 100.
Yeah.
Yes. Everything in the range between 1 to 120 it will take. So yes, it will work.
Okay.
In the front, we would see that that will work. It just print that your age is 100.
Okay.
Okay.
Can
But
you
when
there's a break because I'm in the same case. They run, never end. So
yeah.
how to use the break? The Init.
Okay. And did you use, so you use break after accept, or you use break after try? You use break after try, after the else, right?
Correct. I want to use
Yeah.
break because they never ending to print that
Right.
invoice. Right. Yeah. So I want to use break there. I see how to use
Yeah.
break.
So you can, and there are ways to go about fixing the while as well, right? Like how you can have the while. Now, if you really truly want to do input validation for the user, just use if else statement or if elif. That's probably the best way. And you have submitted the assignment. When I looked at your assignment, that's the proper way, right? So what I'm showing here is when you're using exception, it's really for you. It's about detecting the error, possible error in the program, and we would anticipate that. So that way, in the case where it would, you know, continues forever, we can break, we can also fix it in a way that it would work. Okay. Good job. Yes. So second suggestion after what Chris suggested is to add the break, like what we've seen in the example. Any other comment or question?
I did actually. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
I didn't see you put the import CIS. Right.
Yes, because you only import CIS if you trying to identify what that error would be. So you would import the sys if you're using a method from that module to find what that error would be and where that would locate it in the memory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Alberto?
I did notice that with the code as you have it right now, if you
Mhm.
do an invalid input and because it sort of loops back,
Yeah.
it won't actually show the print your age is and then the age. It'll
Right.
just finish there with after you
It
input your.
just ends there because as the input there. So we have to add, so instead of using try and accept for the truly input validation, we have to really just nest the if. That would be in that function, right? You can still create a function, define a function, and inside it, you would just state the condition. If it's above this range, right, show invalid input. If it's under this range, show invalid input. And then have it come back and prompt again. Because otherwise, as it is right now, like Alberto said, yes, it did end at the second time that it prompted the input. Okay, but it did get out of the forever loop, so we have to break it out of the forever loop. And then so I want you to experiment with this, and so that way you can see it and you can understand it. And in the case if you apply this for different areas for your script, for development, for security reasons, or when you see that again when you work with developers, you will be able to know what that is. Okay.
Can you tell me that return age, that part?
Oh, right here. I wanted to return the value that the user input, so it would be able to print it down here.
Oh, because you put 100, you
Yeah.
put 100, they come to else, return age.
Yes. It tried it, and then it checks, so it's true here, so it's gonna go here. Now we can, when I worked on this, I use Assert. You can definitely use Assert. Okay. But you kind of have to position the Assert in the appropriate way. So when I first wrote this, I wrote it with Assert, and then I changed my mind and I deleted the program. I should have kept it for you so you can see. But you can, so there are many different ways. So you can try with the exceptions that we talked about. Okay.
If you wanted to use Assert, would it replace the if-else statement? Because I was trying it, but I was having a couple errors, but it would essentially replace the if-else, right?
Yeah, and the thing with Assert is that Assert, it doesn't work very well with the range like this. Assert, you have to take the range and break it into multiple asserts. You can have as many assert as you want there. But then you have to state what, if it checked false, how is it gonna follow after that? Okay, because if you just simply replace assert here, it's not gonna like it. So I ended up with this program, I ended up with like multiple assert, and then I have to check for the else. And I ran into a couple of things with the except area. So, this is kind of just to show you how that would use either the type error or the value error, as we know that would be a value error. Okay.
And each assert would jump to the except, right?
Yes. And what you can also do is you can also nest the try and accept, right? So that's what you're talking about, is to nest it. And the way Python is that it sees everything with indentation. So watch your indentation when you write it.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a question. I want to see you input something to make output has has the last line, print in void input, try again from the except. I want to see what the case,
yeah, so when we, if so it did get to here,
yeah,
when I caught the value, the error, but it just stops my program. So I have to fix my while. Because when I started doing this, I see a comment. So let me see if other people type this in. Fine, except it still work with your add conditions. Yeah. So if you try it without, if you try it without try and accept, if you just remove the try and accept with just the if else condition, then it should work ideally. The try and accept block with I've seen it just when you're creating the program, check the input validation, but once the program finished, it's taken out. I need to see it to see. Okay. So if you do a real life program, you know, with this, is it gonna be utilized for like the application base for the user to see? Probably not. Okay. So if you simply just do try and accept with the value error and then it generates something. So I'm going to show you the race one so you can see why that is. Okay. With the race in the next one. Okay. So on the next one, we are going to write the program that accepts the user input between 1 to 10, and it raises the exception when the input is not within the given range. So when you do that, right, it's just going to stop. It's going to tell you that this happens. Okay, that's the whole point of raise. It's to let the programmer know that this occurred. Okay. And so what we have here is we have a control between 1 to 10 and we want to raise it. Okay.
So to get it clear, we're just trying to make it do that program. We're not actually trying to fix it, right? That's not the point.
Right. It's not the point. It's a point. It's about applying the value error, right? It's about seeing that exceptions and looking at that exception and knowing what that is. Because the functionality of this is for you to be able to identify what that is and possible built-in. But when you start looking at other example, you know, the example that we've seen is divided by 0. And when you see that, right, like if you analyzing data using computation or calculation for your data, yeah, it should tell you. We can raise an exception and let us know, so that way maybe we have to go back and fix that portion. Okay. So here's the second one. And in the second one, it's pretty straightforward. When you look at the problem, it tells you that we have to get it to be between 1 through 10. Let's say like input values for your ID, like the first digit. It has to be, you know, you can have it 1 through 9 or whatever, right? And if it's not within that scope, it's going to raise an exception. So I'm going to test it with a valid number first of 5. So it tells me that the number is 5. Now let's run it again and test the number, right? Let's say 13. Okay. So in this one, I have a num, a variable that stores the input, and I prompt the user, it parses it as integer. Then I would use if num is greater than 0 and num is less than 11, print number. Okay. Else raise the exception invalid number. So as you see, when I ran it with the number 13 as an input, it tells me here that the exception is invalid, and it printed the exception parameter that I put in, invalid number. And you simply just use exception here, and whatever you want it to state, you will put that inside the parameter. Okay, so this is a simple one just to raise an exception, and on the next one you see that it will be incorporated.
I have a question.
Sure.
The output last line exception, invoid number, that part is error.
Yeah, so it sees, it's basically it's saying that if it's out, if it check false for this statement, it goes to the else here, and it's gonna raise the error. Yes.
Oh, raise the error. Okay.
And whatever you wanted to state, you put that in here.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm.
Let me check the chat. No, it's
Okay.
not. It's not gonna it's so what we're doing is we're replacing what the system error would be with, you know, with the condition that we stated. So we would say that anything outside of that scope, see it as exception, and when it sees it as an exception, just output the message. But it's not nothing that the user would see, it's for you to see, as it would say, oh, that's outside of what you told me to look for, then I'm gonna show you the message that you wanted. Okay.
Hey, will this type of input validation help prevent buffer overflow vulnerabilities?
If you're looking at, well, it depends, right? So I'm trying to see if you're looking at like memory offset specifically. You can actually, yeah, so you can use like the ID operator to really say if the address is at this point, yeah, raise an exception. So you can do it like that.
All right.
Because you know that it's gonna fill it up, because buffer overflow just means that it's gonna reach that certain address or beyond that certain address, right? Because it keeps writing to it. So what you can do is you can control it with memory address, and that's how I look at it. Sure, you can do that. Now, so in that case, what you can also do is, if you wanted to just, instead of just raising it, we can go about doing something about it, right? Like, and then we tie it back to some of the other built-in where we can say, okay, when it gets to this point, like you can do assert with that. And then to be able to say, if it's this condition, then we can nest a try, and it's gonna call another function.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? So, okay, this one is so that way you can see how race is used. That's the whole purpose, because we kind of look it over. All right, on the next one, we are going to try assert. We did try assert during the lecture. Okay, so for number 3, we're gonna ask for the username and use assert to validate that name is alphabetic, because it's a string we can check for is alpha, right? And raise an exception if the user input the numbers. Okay, so now I like this a little bit more, where I don't have to reopen it in multiple windows, but you know, you have your choice of IDE. So let me pull this down so you can see. Okay. So I have a try, an assert, accept, else, and finally. I wanted to add all of them so you can see it together. You don't have to do it that way. So we have name and ask the user to insert name. We check if it's alphabet using assert. Okay. And in the accept, it would raise a value error if it's not correct. Else, it just print out the name that they entered. And then finally it's going to run either way. Like it's just going to move on to that. So here we go. So I'm going to put in first, I'm going to use a valid name, and you notice that it print, right? Because it is alphabet, and I would have your name. Now, when they started adding space and things, it's going to see it as other. So, you know, and we, you know, this is just to illustrate that how you can use assert base. And finally, let's run it again, and we're going to try numbers with it, ABC. Okay. So at this point, when I try the numerical value and ABC, what will happen is it's going to raise, right? It raised a value error. It's going to tell me that, yeah, it did not enter the correct name. Okay, so it kicks it over to accept. Okay, so if everything works, these two parts work. Okay, because the raise just simply stopped the program. Okay, and then it's just going to include the message in here like you see in red.
What's the purpose of the finally part?
Finally, if it gets to it, if it moves, so if it tries and if it tries successfully, it's going to move on to the finally part. So if you wanted to do something in the last part, right, beyond the try and accept, then you can add the finally. It's not really, you know, when I went through like so many, not just the documentation, and I start looking at example and what people put for best practices. It's not really useful very much in such case, because, you know, like a lot of the times it doesn't even have any, you know, but if you wanted to incorporate something, like what I did was I just have it say thank you after it finishes the else, it's gonna get there. Okay, so let's see, I'm gonna rerun this. Okay, and then I'm just gonna put A, B, actually 1, 2, 3. Okay, and again it's gonna raise that because it didn't check if it's true. Now that's because also I'm using one assert just to look for alphabet only, right? But in the case where if you're looking at passwords, if you really want to use the stuff for like input validation, then you have to think about how that would be numeric as well, and then how that's gonna, you know, so if you know, we can have it raise if it's not in that scope, etc. So
okay, and the finally runs like no matter what, right? Whether it's correct input or incorrect input. Okay.
Yeah, but because it when it stops at that point, it doesn't even get to the finally, you see. So that's really more on the compiler and the interpreter side. So it's really after it raised exception, it just stops at line 5. So when you do a raise like this,
doesn't it print the thank you though? Doesn't it print the thank you right after?
So I'll show you too. 23, right?
Yeah, it prints thank you right before the traceback.
Right.
Okay.
So it still goes through that part right here, regardless.
Okay.
but your value, your error is caught here, and that's what we want to see with exception, right? It should catch that there. Okay. Okay. Any question on 3? Okay.
I lost this part. When you put the 23, it goes through to
Finally.
no,
Yeah.
goes to your name 23.
Uh-huh. So
But-
when you do 23, it's because when it catches the error, it's still gonna pull the finally, but then it's not gonna print your name because it's not true here, because
But
23 is not
I see
alphabet.
your output as enter your name 23. Your output have 23, even that number.
Oh, it did output 23 on.
Yeah.
It's just because of either if you're using idle, or if you're using an IDE for Python, whatever you input, it shows. This is just what I input.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't printed, yeah.
Okay,
But if so if I do like this, see, then now it prints and now it says thank you.
Okay.
But if I put in a number,
okay,
like 1, right?
Yeah.
It just catches the error.
Okay. Catch your error. Okay. Okay, I understand.
Okay. Other questions?
Finally part is just whatever they always have finally that part.
Yeah. So if you do use a finally, it's still gonna get there. And then the bottom part on your shell, it's gonna show the error that you wanted to raise. Okay. Now, if we don't use finally, yeah, it stops there. Okay. Let's do one more. So I originally put all of this together in like 2 exercises, and then I was like, well, maybe if I just piece it out to smaller chunks, that way you can see it a little bit better. So here we're gonna do digit, right? Like this would be the number, and we would use assert except again. Okay. So for number 4, we're just gonna use it for a phone number. Okay. So here is the one I wrote. I have a try phone int input number phone. So first we parse it as an integer. And in order to check that it is 10-digit and use the built-in method that Python had, we have to convert it, or yeah, we have to make it into a string so we can do a length. Now, if we remove this, it's gonna lack some functionality in that it won't be able to look at it as digits. So F5, so 909, oops, I need to type it in here. That would be helpful. 9999999. So it tells me it's a good phone number. Now let's run it when it's shorter. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, not enough digit. Okay, let's so at that point, so when I put in 1, 2, 3, 4, it kicks it over to this except, right? Now let's run it with F5. Let's run it with ABC. Then it uses this except. Okay, so you can have multiple except like this.
So that
And
I have a question for that value arrow and assertion error. That is a build function, right? Python build already, right?
right, that's a built-in. So we can use the length to check for the number of characters in that, right?
Yeah.
And so that was our assert.
Mm.
And so we can also use the to accept to be able to check if it's not digit or not enough digit.
Okay, so that accept value arrow is Python build already, right? We just
Yeah, so the value error, that's Python built in.
okay.
And then assertion error, why do we want to say assertion error is because we use assert here, okay, to check for the number of digits. So if I put in only 4 digits, right, that's an assert error, assertion error, it's going to output this message.
But for last question, they give you an error. They give you like a whole bunch that this
yeah,
time
because I use a race in the last one.
okay.
Yeah, so it still
race.
output, yeah, race. So in the last, in number 3, I use a race, and in this one I didn't.
Okay, you use the race, they gave the output, they gave you that.
Yeah, so here it gave me the error information.
Yeah, Python build that already gave us. Okay.
Yeah, the value, so yes, it's built in already. A lot of the things that we've been using, because it's no point of rewriting from scratch if you already have it in the like the actual library to use, so we don't need to rewrite that.
Okay, I see.
Okay. And the difference between this one and that one was that when we use the second except here, that was for the assertion. And the first except is for to check if it is, you know, alpha. I mean, is digit, I'm sorry. Now, can you use is digit here? If you make it this way, you don't have to. But if you have it where it now when you use is digit with the built-in method, what will happen is you don't parse it as integer. You treat it as a string. But then you cannot raise the value error. So there's some lacking with that. So if I don't parse it as integer here, I can definitely check for, I can do assert is digit, right? But then I won't be able to have the first except there. I don't need it actually. So, any question? So yeah,
so
there's several ways.
Oh,
yes?
Sorry. It's better to do it the way that you have. That way we can say like the specific kind of error.
Yeah. So the whole deal about exception is to really see what type of error, if we're expecting those type of errors, right? But if you wanted just for the program to work, you've seen that in the string chapter where we can just check it for is alpha as from the input, and then you don't have to parse it, right? But you know that when you do input, everything is in string. So if you wanted to type it, then you have to parse it.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions, comment? And you know, this area is sometimes can be difficult to grasp because there's a lot of like different things, and you can look further into different type of error, especially for the area that you wanted to really pursue Python in, right? Because there's nobody that's gonna know everything, even like senior developer. I mean, you know, that's why documentation is there, and things are changing. People update things and they add new things to the library, sure. So this kind of give you the basic on how you would be able to use these built-ins. And so with that, any questions on the exceptions? We're going to move on to class on the last two. Can you have more than one assert condition? I think with Python, when you use it, you can try. When I tried it with the and, because it doesn't use the double ampersand, you just use the word and. It did not like the parameter for me, like the condition parameter, the range. So I ended up, when I wrote the first one, I ended up using multiple assert for that. Okay. And then I even nested at some point. So the program became a lot longer than what I expected. But okay. No questions on these. Okay, so the next two are about class. We are going to create class and then create object within the class, and to have the methods in that class. So for number 5, it tells you to create a student class.
Professor,
and yes.
Before you go on, I think Michelle is asking, can you have more than one assert condition?
Mm-hmm. So let's go to here. So take a look at number 1. So let me comment this out. Right. Let's try assert. And you have age is less than equal to, was it greater than equal to 100? And age is less than or equal to, sorry, I have a typo there. 1, like this.
Can you share the screen? Okay. Let me see.
Like that, right? Or is that's the one that you were working on? Okay, so let me see. My print is not indented. This should be back a little bit.
The else you don't have if, so the else doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right. I know. I commented that out. I forgot to get that to work. Okay, so here I go. 20. Let's do 200. Yeah, so it's not getting, let's see what it tells me. For the traceback age, get age, it can't finish that. Assert age is greater than, and okay. Yeah, so it's giving me assertion error. Then we have to catch that assertion error, Michelle. Then maybe we can write accept assertion error. And then add more to that. But yeah, it can't plug that in. So we ended up catching an error with another catching error process. Okay. Question? I'll rewrite this program tonight or tomorrow when I have some a chance to get it cleaner. Like Chris was saying, yeah, it needs a lot of TLC. So.
But you use Assert. I saw the notes. You use else to if a set condition satisfied, they go to else. I saw the notes.
Yeah, so you can, if you do assert, you can print. I need to bring this else a little bit further down, of course. But the way I used the else here was originally for the if. So I have to take the else after the accept. So I would probably put it down here a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I can do something else there. You can do that. But this else was originally for the if statement.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that would be what you would see if you're trying to do it like this. So it's better just to use the if with this and not having to try and accept it if you want input, like what we said, input validation. But if you want to catch the error, then you would use try, accept, and other built-ins. Okay, that help, right? Any question? Okay, so let's talk about class. We want to practice this because next week we're going to do inheritance. And so we're going to create a student class. The attributes will be name, ID, and gender. And we want our program to have user input. So these would likely be input, okay? And in the methods, I had asked for you to do a register method, add course method, greet, and print courses. So we have 4 methods along with the init method to make sure that you tell the interpreter that the members are part of that class. Remember that when we work with the self and all of that. Okay. And this, when you have student select or type in their class, it needs to go into a list, not a variable. Okay. And because we're using that across multiple methods, we also need to think about it needs to be global or local. Okay. So once you establish or complete number 5, then you can use number 6. Now, you can hard code this in or you can do input. Either way is fine with me. What I did last night was I tested with just hard coding, and then I ended up changing it to the input for the user to type in their information. So either approach is okay with me, as long as you have your class and your method and you're able to call right? And get it to work. Okay. So do you have any questions before we look at the program?
By methods, do you mean function?
Yes. Because yeah, when you use it as a method. Yeah, so you have to define your functions. Okay, so let's look at the last two. It's a little longer, so I'll scroll down. Okay, so I have a class called student. I have a list for the courses. First thing first, in your class, we need to do the init initiation for the members. Okay. I just have a print here. Thank you for being a student at MVC. Then I do a self.name. And then I have it as input. Chris had a question about this when we were doing the fruit class in the assignment. So I want to incorporate something so you can see it, what the user can input. Self ID. So we wanted to have self.id. And this is just the standard for Python, right? Input. And we want it to be integer for the ID. And if you don't want it as an integer, you can keep it as string by not parsing it. Then you have self gender. Then you would have input. You can say, you know, enter gender, MF, other, etc. Right? Whatever you want to do there. So I just put what is your gender. So the commented part that was originally, I hard code a lot of these things. So that's slightly different than what you see there. Okay. Now for the methods. So do you have any question on this part? We saw this also in our lecture.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Okay, good. So since you, and make sure that we have the self here. Okay. And if you look at the commented out one section that I did, right? Also the method, and with this, I use the parameter instead. Okay. So if you hard code all of the information in, you want to consider, right, including the parameter here, and also we wanted to declare our members. All right. So now for the second part, which is the method, I have a method called register, and I simply use self again here. And for the num, this is going to be the integer, because I wanted to ask the user, how many classes are you going to register for? Right? 1 through 5. Why is that? Why do I want it to do that? Well, I wanted to use that length, that number of classes, to control the list of the courses that they're going to type in. Okay. So now from here to the next method, so what I'm doing is I'm calling on the next method, which is add course. So after they tell me how many classes they're going to register for, then they're going to type in the name of the class that they want to add. So in the function add course, right, I'm using the num from the last one. And again, we want to use self. And that has to be in the first part of the parameter. It has to be there. Okay. Then since they're adding multiple classes or courses, we wanted to use a for loop. So I would say for I in range num, for each course, they can put in the name of the course, like English, math, psychology, etc. And as they put that in, I want to append it to my course list that I had at the beginning. Okay.
The code. What your list? Beginning put the list
Up
code.
here.
Okay. Self.
Yeah.
Course.
Yeah. So in order for it to be part of that class, the self has to be there.
Okay.
Okay. So when you append that to the list, you still have to say self, right? The list name, append, and the list. Then in the for loop down on the next one, I want to print it, right? I want to show what they have added. So I have a print course. And I show that you are enrolled in, and to read what was appended in the course list, I use another for loop, and then I print each of the course. And then on the next one, this should be a little bit higher, but you know, on the next one, because I was writing this first and I added these. But on the next one is the greet. Yes, question?
I want to understand your I in self total course. That self total courses means list.
Yes.
List. Okay.
Because any container that you use as part of the class, you have to say self. Or whatever you call it, right? You don't have to call it self, but in the field, everybody, you know, all programmers that have been trained to, they said that it's using self is a common practice. So yeah, most of the time you're gonna see self there, but you can name it whatever you want. So if you do that, the first part right here has to be established. Okay. So in the greet, I simply just say hi or hello, right? And then I would use self.name, which has input. So that way they can input their name and it's going to say hello. If, you know, you put in Michelle and say hello, Michelle. Okay. ID, self ID, and then the gender. So now the last part is when we call and we create objects. So I have, so this is really for the number 6 part, okay? Because I have it as input, I would create 3 objects for the 3 students. Student 1, okay? That will be the object in the student class. And then I would have it for student 1, register, greet, print course. Student 2, this is an object. And for that, I would have it register, greet, and print. And again, for student 3, same thing. So when I run this, it asks me, what is your name, right? So let's say I put Kyle, 1, 2, 3, 4, gender, male. How many classes do I want to register? Let's say 3. Okay. English, math, and let's say computer programming. And then again, it's going to ask me for the next one, as it would store that with the second object, and the third object. Okay. Now, if you hard code it in, you can just say student1 equal student and then put in that information in the parameter. John, ID number, male. Student1 add course math. Student1 add course English. Student1 add course whatever, right?
But in real situation, we would have it like you have it right now. We won't hard code
Right.
anything.
Right. So in real case scenario, we wanted to create the object and use that object to call on or to use the method with the object, register, greet, and print courses. And that will be, as it stored the courses in the list, right? And then, so we can use the function or the methods with that.
You did mention we're going to use GUIs, or we might.
Yeah, I'm gonna, after we do the inheritance, I'll touch on it, but yeah, you can incorporate module with it. So you have to understand, because when you look at the module that they write for UI, right, you're gonna see classes and objects and things like that. This is why we need to understand, beyond that you create, but when you look at other programs or modules, you're gonna see class, objects, subclass, and so forth. So yeah, after this in the next part, I will share that with you. So my husband also, he teaches little kids Python, and in his classes, by the end, they make an app with full UI. So if a 12-year-old can do it, of course we can, right?
Exactly.
So
we can make two.
Exactly. So
so for
yes.
your coding beginning part,
Yes, this is the introductory part.
You can go up. I want to see the beginning part.
Oh, the beginning. Yes.
Okay. I want to understand more about the definition initial self, this part, because for your ending part, you call function register add course, you didn't use this beginning part.
Yeah, so this is not something that you really call. This is a way that we can tell the compiler or the interpreter that all of these variables are part of the class.
Michelle has a very good question about hard coding.
Okay. Yeah, I saw it popping up earlier, but let's see. In general, are attributes optional as parameters when defining a function, method, and object? Why did you not hard code the name, ID, gender in def? So yeah, so what happens is I wanted to use the parameter when I call that here, so that way it plugs it in instead of using this. So if I hard code it up here, I cannot change it throughout. I have to update it by reassigning. So down here, if I pass it as parameter, right, I can have a lot of different parameters that will plug in for the ones up here. So basically, I treat them as container up there instead of assigning the value to that container, and that will be more fixed.
There is another way where you can have parameters though.
Yes.
But it's just going to make it move. I mean, it's also going to be like that, but you're going to, instead of definite initialization, you're going to have those inputs outside of that. And then instead in the initialization,
yeah, so you can do it that way too. So so I can have the input above it, right? And then I can do the self.name, ID, and gender. to be able to do that. But still, you still want to see that value being utilized. So the way I have it here is that I would have the parameter plug in so that way I don't have to reassign it in case if I exchange. Okay. But it's just like a container, and then we can just throw anything in that container at that point when we call that method. So yes, you can use, there are two other approaches. Like you can say, yes, you can assign something here and then use it there, but it would just be fixed to that member. And whenever you use the attribute from that member, it's just going to retrieve it from that container. You can update properties. So hard. Yeah, it's not. But the whole point is to be able to use the attribute from the member, right? So what we're doing here is when we do it like this, we're adding properties to that member. But if you want it, you know, it's better just to create separate objects, and either way, whether you hard code or you do it like that. Echo, you have a question?
A question, because your code 3 students, 1, 2, 3.
Uh-huh. Because number 6 asks for 3 students.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you write the 3 students, you can't use it for number 4 student.
No, yeah. So in this case, we're using 3 objects for 3 students. Oh. And now if you reusing one object for multiple students, right, then it will just override the information for each one. So we use 3 objects for 3 students. So what you can do with that is that, let's say that we would have a method to store the course and their information into a file after each one. And then, you know, loop back and ask another user to input name, address, or name, gender, the information, and then the courses again. Because if you have one container that's going to store all of that, right? And then you have new user that's going to add in their information. We want to be able to take the old information and we wanted to put it into a file, like a text file or, you know, some kind of file. And then we would have the new user put in their new information and then again store as file 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we will have records of each of the user information. So that's another way that you can do it.
Yeah, so that makes you ask what does the hard coding mean in this example?
Yeah, so yeah, that's correct. Hard coding means that we would write it into the code, like John 1, 2, 3 male, like this. Oh. Okay, instead of having the user input. And yeah, that Chris is right. There's not a lot of functionality with that. It's good for testing. Beyond that, right, the usefulness in that in the real world practices, we don't really hard code. Everything we do is, you know, the whole point of having a computing system or even in software level is that to be able to have input and output, right? Whatever you input, you can also output in text or file or whatnot. But hard coding is good for testing only purposes. It's not, yeah, that's why I commented everything out. So I just show you the code as in.
Yeah, your case is not hard writing. You just ask people input, right? Input what's the name, what's the...
Yeah. So values change, technology change, price changes, product changed, you know, so there's so many things that's changing all the time. So if you hard code, then you have to go back and keep editing it and editing it over and over and over again. So you want it to be fluid. You want it to be in such that you don't have to, you know, fix the beginning to the end, right? And so if you want something that's more like you can create templates for things, and we talked about that last week when we talked about module. You can incorporate some of the static things, right? And then you can have things that would be changing throughout your program by accepting user input, right? By updating, by calling other functions that would have some updates. So, okay. So hard coding is only good for like, you know, like if you wanted to test or beginning. That's true. It's inefficient to hard code.
Yeah, and in your case, you use the customer input so that customer can do what
Yeah.
like
You can, right, and you can expand on this, right? You can still store it to a file, and you can add other functions, and then you simply just reuse the object. So let's say that I wanted to add more functionality to my program. I just define another function, and then I just reuse these objects, right? So, and this gives it structure versus before we don't really use object. We use function, and we use method, and we use variable and lists and such, but this gives you structure, and then it also helps in troubleshooting or editing the program too. Okay, so now you started to have, you know, different areas that you can look at in case if you wanted to fix or you wanted to modify. Other questions or comment? Yep. So if you wanted to change up things for the interface for the user, Chris mentioned that yes, you can do that. You can add in components for the interface. So just a little side note while you're looking at this, right? I talked to Joanna and Gabriella yesterday about the bird project deal, and she's supposed to give me additional documents. So what happens there is that her students, they pick like 5 species of the birds, because I told her that there's no way that I'm gonna be able, I said I don't want my student to block all of that data from way back when for all these species. It's just way too much, and you know, it's just so much information. So I told her that I needed a scope. And then what Gabriella is going through is she said that she can have her student look at the intervals, the mean, the medium, and all of that. So what we can do with the project is we can plot it out, right? And then we can give them the information, and then they will give us, hopefully, right, some kind of analysis from the statistics side, and then we can simply output that on screen, or you know, if you add the GUI, you can show that like this is the mean for this species of birds. So with that, I can still grade you based on all the concepts that we covered, right, using class, object, methods, and such. So if you choose to do that project, it does require some external sources like some statistics, unless you wanted to do it yourself. It's not that hard. The section that she's looking at, or if you wanted to do the regular project then you can fulfill the requirement. So I'll put together a list for you to select, and then you can look at the rubric on how it will be graded. So every single concept, you know, the major concept that we went over, that's part of our learning objectives, that will be incorporated with the object.
Are you talking about the database?
Well, yeah, the bird database that she's using from the biology website. So, okay. And so also additional information about the next two classes. So what I had asked them to offer is the next two is going to be the networking one and the IoT ones. And then the two following that will be the security ones and the advanced one, and that should take care of the complete certificate. So that would address both sides, like you can take both of them or you can take one or the other, you know, and also it depends on your schedule, of course. I haven't gotten confirmation on they approved the schedule or not. Usually when my supervisor, when she approves it, she would let me know. So I'm hoping by Friday or Saturday that she would let me know that it's approved. But it was submitted last week by the deadline, and so we don't have as many CIS courses as what you would normally see. It's what we have from the last spring or even less, because we do have some cuts in some area. Okay. So I did look at the networking text that I wanted to use. And then I'll link that to Canvas for you guys to look at if you'd like.
Michelle asked a question.
Yeah, I see. Example on Monday. It's to try. I'm not sure. Oh, for the dimension from the box from Monday. Okay, let me see. Look at the assignment real quick to get the exercise number. That was number 5. So let me share that. So Michelle asked to look at number 5 again from our Monday. And your grade should be updated at this point. So if you have something missing, let me know. Okay. Okay, it says, why is the... Sorry, I opened the wrong one. Okay. So she asked, why is the width not a parameter for the functions B volume? It's hard coded, so I thought it would be included. Yeah, so this is the width. And I did a square box, not a rectangular box. So I'm using it to the cube.
Yeah, this part I wonder why you use volume equal 0.
Yeah, so I didn't do an init on this one, right? Because I showed you how you could do that on the other one. On this one, I just used the self self volume, self width, return self volume. And then initially I printed the width of the object, and then I bring down the volume of the object.
Do you think you need the top volume equal 0 at that part?
Yeah, because I wanted to use it inside this function, and I also wanted to use outside of it. And also, so going back to Michelle's question, I didn't use it as parameter here because I assigned it there. So yes, you can use it as parameter there. If you do the self.width, right? Equal width, and then you just pass it with the 13. So either way will work, hard-coded. For both of them. But because we calculate the volume here, so I just bring down the bvol there. So for, because I return the self volume, so I do that there. So if you do, if you store it in something like volume, then yes, you can also bring it down that way too when you call it. So if you don't have it, declare up here with 13. So is the width different? If the width is inputted, then what happens differently? Then, so if the width is inputted, so what I have to do is I have to say width is input, right? And then I need to be able to call that here. It's about the same. It's still going to be printing here because it's going to store it and it's going to use the object to reference it. So yeah, it's still going to be the same the way I have it because it's not going to be as parameter. Because if you look at that one and this one, the way, so you would have to have self width equal int input, enter the width of the box, and then yeah, but so we have to state that with the init and then be able to have it work down here. That's, yeah, it's still going to be the same because you're still using a variable and then you make that become a member of that class, right? And then you are using the variable, or you using the object and its attributes. Now, I think on the other program that I did, I think it was number 4, where it was hard coded. That was the one with the car, or the class example that was hard coded. You should, you should, right? On this one, I didn't because I had shown another example that has it, but by practice, you need to, okay? Okay, let me open the, so to kind of reflect back on what we were talking about with hard coding, I think that was example 3. Yeah, so this one is hard coded. And so I use parameter here, I use parameter there. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I meant to tell you guys something, now I forgot. But oh yeah, if I could think of it, if it's something that you can use the internet for, I'll put an announcement up. Other than that, then that's it. Is there any other questions that I can address or something that you need help with? Yeah, I choose not to use the textbook that I originally selected 2 years ago, only because it's cheaper to use this book and I supplemented some of the notes. When you put curriculum through, you have to list more than one textbook. And as faculty, we have the freedom to select the book. And sometimes if the book listed is too outdated, we have to update it. Now, in the case, if we shared the course with the high school, we have to keep using the same book for 2 years. So this is why in some courses we have to stick with certain textbook like CIS1A, 17A, B, and C, because those are, and CIS5, because those courses are also taught at the high school. I opted to use this book. I will likely use it again in the winter because it's so close to this semester. I will probably use another textbook, but Python has so many, we call it, open resources. So in the future, I might still look for a better free book that I can use. I know that this book sells on Amazon for like $26 or $16 or something like that. And when I teach Java, I use Oracle series book because Oracle maintain Java. So I tend to, and the book that I use is usually about $30 or $40 or less. Because I don't see the point of buying $100 book unless it's a really good textbook. Like, I buy Cali books and I buy other books to support its author and things and to see if they added anything that outside of the documentation. But other than that, a lot of the resource you find is really on the internet. So yes, I might even consider not using a textbook for even the next class or the future classes. But having a book sometime, because the student get financial aid, sometimes they'll get additional book funding. So having, and so it's kind of like a double whammy for us. If we select a book, it can, hurt other students, but then it benefits some students. And then if we don't select a book, it, so it's like 50-50 for us. The bookstore always push us to select a book. And with financial aid, some student, they get a little bit of extra money if we do select the book. So yeah, it's, but course outline of records, it gives you an area of the book that we would choose. And some faculty, they would stick with that. But I found that some of the listed books, over the 2 years, version change with Python, things change with Python. So I have to use a more recent book to answer your questions. Okay. And when I teach C++, I use whatever book the other faculties use in the prior class. So that way the students don't have to buy the book, but I supplemented my notes. And there's a lot of work that goes into, your notes and the other classes' notes and things like that. So, because they were telling me yesterday when I teach the non-credit courses that, in the future, I can't use it as my course load because I'm required to do so many courses. But I had told the dean that it takes so much time just to put together 4 hours of class on Saturday each week. Finding resources, putting things together. But ultimately they don't see it that way. So, but anyway, you will have a survey at the end of the class, and you know, whether you hate or like the book, this is when I read it and I would say, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to use that text again because everybody completely hates it. And yeah, I saw that the text doesn't have a lot of meat in it this time, so we'll find something that's better. Okay. I looked them up. Almost all of those listed. Yeah. So I will give you so this Eric Cho does a packet tea book. I had added it to my cart. Let me see if I can find it for you. For the networking one, you mean? Because he wrote to release if there's like a edited version that's free for you guys. Yeah, it's this one, but there's two versions of this. There's one that's like with the Python 2, and then there's one with the Python 3 where he co-write with someone. So I'm considering using his text. I think the new one is better when he co-write with someone. So if you are searching through Amazon, you'll find it. And he's been in the field for a long time. He released a couple of books for Python networking. So this is the one that I'm using, and I'm not teaching the IoT one unless there are changes in the schedule. I had plans to teach that class, but and we looked at some of the emulator for it. So unless there's modification to course load and instructor assignment, then I might pick up another class because maybe one of my other classes is canceled. But I'm teaching 27 again, CIS31A, risk assessment and risk analysis. It has some CEH component with risk analysis with it. And then what other things? I'm teaching, you know, the programming ones again, like CIS7, CS11 for assembly, and
You got a
this one.
lot of classes to teach.
Oh, we're to do 5 along with other things. So you know, my work week is about 60 hours on average. And you know, thank God that I'm home all the time, so I can use some of the home time to do a lot of this stuff. But in the past, like I was always at the campus. I'm always, if you go to Parkside Complex, usually you would see my Honda there. I'm usually there till really late because I know that when I get home, I don't get work done sometimes because, you know, I have to cook dinner and stuff. So in between, it's, you know, so, but I enjoy teaching and I enjoy doing this stuff and I enjoy helping the college. So I participate in a lot of things. So it's also my fault. So I can't blame it on anyone. But yeah, so if you have further questions or if you have concern or you have something that you wanted to ask privately, you can also email me. But have a good weekend, everybody. Did you have questions, Aiko?
No, I just ask you, I know a lot of part-time teacher. Are you a full-time teacher, right?
Oh yeah. So part-time teacher, right now their loads are kind of lower. So, and I will get your name from participation list. Have a good weekend, Cynthia. But I don't know if that will change from semester to semester and how COVID will change. From what they tell us is we are operating like this until past November. So we're expecting spring to be kind of like this too, until we get additional information. Have a good weekend, Ricky and Sean. So, but yeah, if things change, then we will let you know. Okay. All right. Other questions? Yeah, San Bernardino Valley is like that as well. I know some school district comes back already. And some school district require the teacher to come back to campus, but not the student. And then some school district is completely remote. So it's really depending on the school district.
Yeah,
but
I see somebody know.
Bye, Michelle. Yeah.
Really.
So yeah, I know that your husband has mentioned to me that you're a friend with a couple of the faculty in our college. So I met with him right before COVID really rolled into effect, because we talked about high school articulation and such. But yeah. So okay, well, I'm glad you solved the problem that you had. I saw